Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is a placeholder intro song.
Thank you for joining us for the Beardy and the Beast Media Club, a full spoiler discussion into a piece of media. Not even a domestically operating CIA agent could stop these spoilers. We're available here and on many other platforms, with a full list available at beardyandthebeast.com. If you enjoy what we do, give us a like and a share, or join the conversation in our Discord or the comments below. My name is Drew, and if I'm the one to the chest, he's the one to the head, Devin.
Hey,
Today we'll be discussing 2015's crime drama Sicario. So, Devin, was this film FB fine or was it CI lame? Hey, 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 hey.
so how long did it take to get the segue?
Longer than I would like to admit.
Um, I I honestly feel this is kind of one of those must-watch type movies. Second time seeing it, and I think it stood up as I remembered it before, and I think it does a lot right with pretty much everything.
Yeah, I guess spoiler alert. Hoo 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 hoo. I'll have plenty of good things to say about the film. Before we get in depth with any of the characters or the plots or the implications or anything like that, I just want to straight up lead with something that I really appreciated right from the beginning, and that was a lot of the filmography stuff. So the panning vistas and the beautiful environment shots.
Yes.
And I feel that some of the greatness of the shots can actually be absorbed from that opening scene where the FBI are doing that raid,
Mm,
because it was going from this um the inside of this dank house. It's dark, curtains drawn, and then kind of uh a dusty, dark SWAT van to this bright outside, like these contrasts like that. And it seemed
yeah.
to be able to maintain that throughout the film.
Mm,
It's just something I wanted to note because I really appreciated how each environment seemed to be distinctly expressed.
mhm.
Um,
Eh,
even down
Much like.
to the motel room
Mm.
that they were staying in. I'm pretty sure I've stayed at that motel room at one point. It had that kind of dank, questionable, dirty feeling, but you're should be fine.
Yeah.
To how the mansion at the end was shot, just pure opulence.
Mm, yes. Um, Another shot that really stuck out to me was a scene when they were flying down to El Paso before crossing the border there, where most shots you'd see the plane. That would be the B-roll shot that they would have there,
Mm.
but instead they had the B-roll shot of the mountains, and you just see the little tiny shadow of the plane.
Hmm. And that was even expressed earlier on, because they had the only plane in flight you saw was the one landing while they were talking,
Yeah,
that military plane. And then as it was taking off, you had a small shot of that shadow too. And I noticed that. And it was
yeah,
that's something I've always been interested in while actually taking off in a plane myself. So I was
yeah.
it's just a little callback to something I'd be interested in rather than, yeah, the B-roll, the plane taking off. For me, it's either go with the shadow or just go full Wayne's World.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another thing that they did with this movie was it was something we've talked about in other movies. I know Carol and Tuesday, we definitely talked about it. It's that no shot felt wasted.
Mm.
There's always something being conveyed there, be it some character moment where you get an idea of Emily Blunt's Kate Mercer, the thought processes, or again just the tension that was built up in so many of the scenes throughout the film, and all of these long shots or quiet shots. It all just came together and built on itself, and the music as well did a lot with that. when there was music.
Yeah, to tie that in well, the border crossing scene. So there didn't it didn't feel like there was any artificial ramp ups. They were able to express the tension, especially via the sound design.
Mm,
Like that entire series of shots, there was like this thumping rhythmic drum and a little bit of this background track, and it was like
yeah,
making you knew something was going to go awry, and you're just like, where is it
yeah,
going to happen? Where is it going to happen? It actually
yeah.
gave you a kind of a glimpse in that tenseness of how the agents were feeling in the motorcade.
Yes, the all of the components there that I felt just helped so much. Like starting from the briefing,
Mm,
they didn't hide anything there. Like this is what's going to happen. This is most likely where the things are going to happen. Follows up to, you see the traffic at the border when they're entering. You get that kind of thumping track, which I want to come back to the music afterwards. The scenes of them just driving through with the police and most of the people that are driving by not even caring that
mhm,
there's this police motorcade. Is like, that tells you what type of area you're in, right? To hearing gunfire in the distance, it has nothing to do with what's going on.
mhm,
You see Kate being, I want to say out of her element, but that's not quite right. It's not that she's a stranger to this type of thing, but you can see that hesitancy on her side because she doesn't know what's going to be happening. To the more collected Alejandro,
mhm,
and then you go back and the music kind of goes out and you just hear that radio chatter building that up to, oh god, there's an accident at the border crossing, so even though we tried to clear a lane, it didn't matter. And the release of that tension was so quick. They didn't even make that scene linger. It was done with military precision.
mhm.
And like it's a masterfully done sequence.
Yeah, I wonder there is something lost there because I would have appreciated an expression of how long and drawn out that moment, like especially with that guy that got out of the car and he had the handgun,
Mhm.
like that kind of showdown in their heads would have felt a whole lot longer than it did for us as a viewer, at least for me. So I
Yeah.
would have liked that to be expressed in that scene. Uh, but what they were able to do with the fact that it was over with military like precision is to keep that tenseness. So it didn't relieve it.
Yeah.
It was build up and then it didn't actually have a release. Like it was a partial release, but then it was able to keep you at an elevated state for the next time that they went into something like that. So
Yeah.
as a form of storytelling, that was masterful. Just my preference. I would have preferred more of a to feel that moment itself a bit more.
So I think how I saw that scene was you wouldn't be able to show that same tension with the actual military
Hmm.
aspect, right? The people who were actually engaged in it. The only place that you could show it was with Kate. And I feel that they did that by like the close up shots on her for so much of it while kind of everything was going on. We only flicked to them when something happened. I think that's what they were trying to go for there. Because I do feel like they lingered just a little bit more on the cop that she saw in the rearview mirror who
Hmm.
was going to shoot her. Right. So, and that's the place where I would expect to see that little bit of hesitation.
Like I know that she was confused in that scene, but I don't. I I think she was acting a bit out of character at that point.
All right.
Like for that to be that the tense moment, like she's got experience in the field, like she commands a unit. You would expect her to be prepared when they got into the like the highest danger zone of that setting, especially since they were at that meeting as well. So the fact that she seemed unprepared and out of her element didn't seem in character to me.
So I don't feel, I don't quite agree. I think that actually stayed pretty consistent because she was in a situation now where she doesn't actually understand the rules of engagement.
Mm,
She doesn't know what's going on, and she expresses that as like, what the hell, this isn't how you're supposed to handle these types of situations. I think that's the difference from being more of a cop and being military.
mm,
So she's perfectly capable of handling herself, but a situation she would have ever been in any type of any regular circumstance.
Hmm. And I guess she definitely handled herself well as soon as the crooked cop like turned on them.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Uh,
there is that. I don't know, there was something off about her character at that moment, and it didn't sit right with me.
Because I mean, she expresses it almost right afterwards, and she's like actually going to her her superior, going, "This is not the rules of engagement," and having to have that whole discussion about, no, the rules have changed. I understand that you're concerned about, are you in the bounds of the law, and I assure you, you are.
No, I get that point. It's just like the fact that she was just sitting there la di da as they were coming into the most dangerous zone.
Oh, I
That she
totally didn't
was
see that as like,
like, she
like
might have been tense shoulder, but she didn't even have her weapon ready. They were briefed on this. It's just my point is like they made her seem amateurish at that point.
so I saw that as, 'cause you got to remember, Alejandro didn't have his weapon ready either.
Mm.
In fact, he specifically says, "Okay, we need to," as he's getting his ready. So, and I didn't see that as being la di da. What I took from that was her almost being hyper aware of her surroundings. Like she wasn't la di da. She was. I felt it as her being very active at looking for the threats.
Mm.
Her role was to be there as a liaison, not as the strong arm. They specifically said that. No, these are the guys that shoot. So yeah, I saw that as a continuation of how they were showing how she's perceiving the world. Uh, the scene that happened before that kind of points me in that direction was when they were taking her in to ask her to join this task force. It was like they focused on the guy wearing sandals, and I took that as her being observant, saying, "Okay, these are her watching what's happening
Hmm.
in the world around her." So I saw that as more of a continuation of that, not a naive, "Ooh, what's going on?"
I do like in the storytelling aspect that she was definitely eyeing up Matt Graver for like the entire time and was suspicious. In fact, the way that
Mm,
they expressed the shots from her point of view made me immediately wonder if he was corrupt.
yeah.
Uh, and actually, I don't know what it was. I felt like there was this must have been a red herring that I can't put my finger on, but I swear her partner Reggie was gonna be like come out as corrupt at some point, as being like paid off or something.
Mm,
I know they just
uh,
like they threw there was something thrown my way about that, and I think it had to do with like his original exclusion.
yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that. I felt so the original exclusion, I can definitely see that being an aspect. The later exclusion, like they kind of justify it afterwards. 'Cause it was like, I know that he's not ready for this type of thing.
Hmm.
He's too green for this type of thing. Right? They did make it clear that both of them were fairly green, but the experience that Kate had helped put her on that task force. And I mean,
Well,
really,
well. I mean,
that's
if you rate that towards the like the so-called twist in that they were
yeah,
eyeing someone green with not the widest breadth of law knowledge.
yeah, but that's exactly why no lawyers,
Yeah. Uh,
right? And that's what precluded the other guy. But
I'm
I got the feeling that that wasn't meant to be a twist. Like I mean, it was a twist, but I don't feel it was. I actually got the impression that they were trying to take her under their wing and actually get her involved in this, but her moral character prevented that. So now it's like, yeah, no, you're just the person to, so we can do this.
I kind of had that feeling throughout it, like leading up until that point. But then I also realized that it might have just been them ensuring that they had a active agent because they would have had to get a replacement had she died. So them taking the her under their wing per se could have been just ensuring that she was prepared to some degree, so isn't a liability.
Uh, I think the motive was to take her in and have her actually be part of this type of team, and they had to pivot to that.
Mm,
I feel like they had to pivot to, well, we got to keep her around because we need this person. We don't want to get someone else involved. But I do think the original intention was to have her be part of this. I didn't feel a deception that way. Like, I mean, especially when like there was the conversation with Alejandro, was like when he's first kind of introduced, like, nope, you're not going to understand any of it. You're going to be questioning all of it. You'll come to see that it was necessary. Right? It seemed like he was grooming her to prepare her to have her be in this type of situation. I got that same type of feeling from Matt as well,
Hmm.
until she became too noisy to.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling. It just didn't last. It
Mm,
didn't linger around. I didn't like sit on it for too long. There was kind of like there was some half formed concepts in this.
yeah.
I think that might have been one of them. And I also feel that like a corrupt ally. Well, that being said, I mean like CIA and a hitman, and but I mean like someone actively working against the mission, trying to kill our three.
Amigos.
Well, I was gonna say protagonists, but it's like hard to define them as such. Our three main characters, and I think that's why I kind of had that feeling that Reggie was gonna be corrupt in the long run.
Mm.
But I'm glad they didn't go that way.
Yeah, I actually kind of like how they played into that without actually having him be corrupt. Just him being friends with the guy who's corrupt.
Mm.
Right. So that was kind of one of those subverting expectations that is done right. It didn't take it away. It just pivoted the context of it.
My
Right.
my thing is there. I knew something was up with this dude, and it was purely for the fact that going back to what you said about how this is a lot like Carol and Tuesday and not wasting a shot. There was no
Mhm.
reason to include that unless
Mm.
there was going to be conflict that was caused by it.
Yeah.
And I didn't see this as a, oh, they hooked up and somehow the bad guys found out about it and they kidnapped this dude. Like that's not a storyline that would ever touch this movie.
Yeah.
So I just naturally knew like, oh, this guy's bad. And then 40 seconds later, he pulls that colorful band out his pocket, and I'm like, yeah, there it is.
And I saw that as there's the clear payoff there. And again, I also think that was one of those things that kind of paid off the observation skills that they showed Kate having throughout.
Hmm.
Because let's face it, she was like definitely drinking and still could had the wherewithal to instantly notice that band.
Well, I mean, pink and blue and practically fluorescent, as thick as my pinky. I mean, I agree. I'm just saying, like, don't that particular moment. You don't have to be that observational.
uh,
I
fair enough.
do. It didn't feel like they were going out of their way to showcase Matt and Alejandro's willingness to go to any extent to get the
Mhm.
information that they needed, and the hookup. I don't even know who it was. The hookup was one of them. Like just like beating this man to a pulp and like legitimately threatening his family to get the information they need. Like
Yeah.
I understood them doing it to the cousin of the gangster or whatever,
Mhm.
but then for them to just full openly go at, mind you, a crooked cop, but still a cop like that.
Oh, it was very clear they were working on their own set of rules. The very ends justify the means.
Yeah, it's almost like government agencies um do what they want and do the things that we cannot. It's almost like there is a different set of rules for them.
Strange how that is. Yeah, it does make me wonder a little bit, like if Kate was a little bit more willing to bend the rules, how it would have changed the situation.
It would have
Just
made that last
like
scene
out of
less effed
imagination.
up. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, that was. But even then, that was interesting because I actually wrote down at that last scene like how gray it is, because we have a guy who is very, very clearly has no qualms with doing what needs to get done.
Hmm.
Literally just threatened her, and right beforehand, like in the major scene beforehand, he literally shot her for pointing a weapon at him. Says never do it again. And then when she does it right at the end, he just stands there. That
I mean,
it was that.
so before we step into that, I think he gave her more time than he would give anyone else That was the implication I had
Mm-hmm.
from that scene when he had the gun under her chin. I definitely thought it was maybe it was because he opened it up with like you remind me of my daughter or some such.
Yeah.
But would I call it softness? Maybe pity he had from like knowing her position and the situation that she's in. But I do think that he gave her 5, 10 more seconds than he would have given anyone else. And
Yeah.
I don't think he took action or even cared that she was pointing the gun at him from the balcony because he knew she was broken.
Mm.
It's probably a bad comparison, but like how you have to break a horse.
Yeah, I could see that. I think I took two things away from that. I do think he definitely would gave her more chances than he would have anyone else. The part that he reminds of his daughter, definitely going to be in her favor. And but again, it goes back to that taking her under the wing. Like
Mm.
I actually think they did want to have her, and I don't know. I almost got the impression that he was hoping she'd pull the trigger,
Oh, I could see
like
that.
almost in like that prove me wrong, prove that you are a wolf.
There is the other possibility. Like that's a really good idea, but there is also the other possibility. His mission was ended
Mhm.
as soon as she signed that paper. Like he had gotten revenge on the mastermind of his wife and daughter's deaths,
Yeah.
and left a long trail of bodies to get there. I mean, at that point, his mission is done, and from the look in his face, like they're. I mean, they might expand it with the sequels, but what reason does he have to keep going from that point?
Mm.
So that could be another reason.
It could be. Uh, I don't know if that quite sits right with me because he didn't. For a motivation like that, I would think more along the lines of, "Well, now that I've done this, I don't care what happens to me." Type feeling. I know there's plenty of examples of it, and not a single one is clicking in my head right now. Um,
I mean, in the reverse though, having that softness or that hesitation would also kind of frame the how do I want to express it? I'll have to leave it as an unfinished thought.
and I think that's the thing. I don't see it as a softness or hesitation. That's no, yeah. Softness and hesitation isn't how I'm meaning that. Him giving her more of a chance isn't the same as being soft. It's
I think you're looking at it
it's
more
like in
of like a
Dredd.
pass the torch situation. I don't see
Yeah,
that in this film at all.
no, I think he was hoping to have that type of situation. I think again they were hoping that she would actually be a fit for this type of task force.
But why would Alejandro even care? His only mission is, as stated in the film, to get revenge.
Why would he care? He did care. Is
But that's
regardless of the why, he did care.
that would be the softness that I mean.
Okay.
So if there's
Yeah, I guess softness is not. Yeah, it's okay. That clarifying that definition, it makes a little more sense because it's not what I would consider as soft. It'd be like when we're talking about Dread, we never call Dread soft necessarily.
no, there's no soft moment. There was no point where it seemed that he had pity, and it definitely seemed that that was a clear expression of Dredd trying to take his this officer under his wing.
Mhm.
But again, that was all muddled in this film. Like I didn't see that as a clear theme at all.
Okay.
It was
Yeah, because I saw
implied,
it with.
but
Yeah, I saw it implied. I saw it
shallowly.
implied often enough. Yeah, I think I saw it implied often enough that it never left my mind, even when when they came back from the border crossing. It wasn't Alejandro or Matt, but it was like the military guys like, "Hey, do you like fireworks?" And like just that including her and showing her what's happening. Like
Mm,
I
but there's
and
no
that's where I'm getting that feeling they
there's no cohesiveness in this team. There are a bunch of random agencies. It would make sense if Matt Graver wanted to take her under his wing, but not Alejandro at all. They clearly expressed Alejandro's motivations in this film.
Yeah, I guess I can see where you're saying it's muddled. I think because there's so many influences
Yeah, that's what I mean from
it
earlier,
can
like
hide that as
half-finished
well. Yeah.
concepts.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. No, I'm seeing where you're coming from that a little bit more. So some of this could just be me
like there could be some projection in
writing.
there or
Yeah.
association with other good pieces, such as Dredd, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
where Dredd overtly said these things.
Mm.
This is kind of like how I take my vanilla lattes, with a whisper of vanilla.
Yeah.
Like if the barista doesn't hold up that cup and just go vanilla, it's too much vanilla. Um,
It's well, it's
but
actually one of the ways I was going to describe the film is it's remarkably subdued.
I would agree. I would definitely agree. In fact, I found it weird throughout this film, but putting aside the fact that we kind of like understand where we're each coming from, especially when it comes to this unfinished concepts that they were kind of weaving throughout
Mhm.
this film.
Yeah.
I found it weird that you're following Kate through this entire film, but the like weirdly cathartic release was actually with Alejandro and the mafia boss or the cartel boss at the end. Maybe that might just be me being twisted, but I guess that's where the film released its tenseness.
Well, it's interesting the way they did that because we're clearly following Kate. The whole thing is prefaced off of her wanting to get the people who, you know, blew up her colleagues, and I kind of appreciated the fact that she wasn't the one who got her hands dirty to finish it.
Actually, yeah.
Right. So the through line is still there. It's still the same antagonist. It still is Kate's story. She's just not the one to pull the trigger in the end.
Up until the point of maximum resistance, she was able to keep her morality, and how that morality was expressed through this film. We didn't have a underwater spider in the sink opening shot. We
Yeah.
didn't need that.
Mhm.
They were just able to express it subtly through and like bigger and bigger and bigger until the end to the I can't sign that document.
Yeah. Yeah,
Actually,
the buildup for that was very similar to the buildup of most of the other tension throughout the film too. I remember specifically, I think it was again after the border crossing. Like she's kind of in the shower. There's the steam on the window on the mirror that deliberately blocks her reflection.
oh, I love
Like it
that.
was framed around her. It was just beautiful. And then to just kind of you could tell she was wrestling with it with the way I think she was like laying in bed or something like, or you could just tell she hadn't slept.
Mm.
You know, she was just wrestling with this because she she wants her quote unquote revenge, but she wants to keep her morality, and sometimes things don't go cleanly. And
Yeah, I
the
don't
way
know.
they express that without her actually having to say it is amazing.
I don't like expressing it as revenge though, because she definitely has the moral standing that I feel this would be another situation of justice.
Yes.
Um, but I guess this is probably a great time right from the beginning. What is it? The third thing I have written down on this piece of paper is finally an actual strong female protagonist. And I guess this is probably the point where I have to rant about it. I'm like, if you have to have your protagonist stand up and be like, it's because I'm strong, it's because I'm a woman, hear me roar, how that sounds in the mind of the viewer is they're saying it to tell themselves that because they don't believe it themselves.
Yeah.
You never hear Kill Bill the Bride say that nonsense. You never hear Ripley say that nonsense. And
Yeah.
you don't hear Kate say that nonsense. They're just strong because they are strong
Yeah.
and they're well written.
Hmm.
The fact that even the fact she was outside of her comfort zone, though with a understandable hesitation, was still moving forward. Any fear she had was understandable for this situation that anyone would
Yeah.
feel. And I guess to kind of like slash rant, like end my little rant about this, it's like at no point do you think she's weak.
Hmm.
Like it honestly it took a CIA agent or alternatively like a 6'4" well built cop to take her down.
Yeah. Well, that's the big thing. It's like, don't worry about making strong female characters. Just make strong characters.
True. True.
Just make strong characters. That's all it is. Don't try to make a character be the perfect, flawless, can't do anything wrong because they're strong female character, or I've got to be the absolute paragon type character. It's
I mean, as soon as you remove any potential flaws, the character becomes uninteresting.
exactly.
I mean, if you think about Star Wars, that's what happened to Rey, and frankly, they cat that casting was perfect.
Mm,
She was the perfect Rey. It's just the script was terrible. And I mean,
Yeah.
whoever greenlit that storyline should probably be axed. IMO.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same reason why I took such issue with Captain Marvel, too. It's just like, this is just not interesting. There's no character growth. There's nothing here. That this movie very well never enters my mind that it's not strongly written. She's not a strong character,
I mean,
regardless of what is said.
if we were to compare this to this concept to movies with male protagonists, there's a reason why Batman does so much better than Superman.
Yes.
Because when you have a perfect flawless character, it is not interesting. A
Yep.
character with flaws is interesting. A character, I mean, I wouldn't call Bruce Wayne or Batman an actual strong character
It's
as
an
far as
interesting
like
character.
a well written character, but is definitely interesting. So it might not be the best comparison, but it just
I
stuck
think
out
it's
in
a
my
good
mind.
level.
Like, at no point do you think she's weak, and at no point did they have to have her surrounded by all her buddies to be like, we can do it too.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it was well expressed in this film that she was more than able to do so.
Yeah.
And I mean, they did the same thing in Dredd.
Yep. Oh,
Uh,
exactly.
like you knew she was green, but they also said like she was only a few points shy of becoming a Dredd.
Yeah.
I know what I said.
I know you do. I see what you did there.
Yeah,
So,
I absolutely
go ahead.
loved her as a character. Well acted, and I'm very surprised to see Emily Blunt in this situation and for her to
Mm.
pull it off so well.
Apparently, she was actually in line to be like Black Widow as well in the Marvel movies. The only
Mm,
reason it was Scarlett Johansson instead of her was because of scheduling conflicts at the time.
like ScarJo. ScarJo was so
Oh
good.
yeah, yeah.
And throwing this out there, really good Makoto.
I agree.
Jeez, people are
I
so dumb.
agree. They
Hashtag,
really are.
hashtag Netflix stop making live action remakes of cartoons. But it was so well acted that I couldn't see any of Emily Blunt's other performances in her.
Mm,
Like I didn't even know it was her until the end of the film, and I can usually be like, oh, you know, that's the girl from this or that's the girl from that. Like
yeah.
I'll usually at least be able to pull it out of my hat. And the same actually to be said for Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro.
Mm, yeah.
Which
Uh,
by my opening pun was originally going to be a thing with names, and I was going to say, "Is this a blah 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 or a Benicio del Terrible?" And I was like, I can't do that to my bro.
well, let's. So here's an interesting thing with the act. Apparently, Benicio del Toro, like 90% of his lines were cut,
Hmm.
and I think that was 100% the right move. Apparently, like he was going to be the one explaining his backstory to Kate, and they just found that it was not working, not what it needed to be, and just kept cutting,
Well, this
cutting his
this
dialogue.
I mean that kind of throws back at least that reasoning to our discussion, the comparisons of John Wick versus Nobody.
Mm,
How people talking about the legend of John Wick versus what's his face in Nobody constantly trying to talk about himself.
yeah.
There's something so much more, I don't want to say mythic, that's not the word, but there's something that draws you in more when someone else tells the story.
Mm.
I mean, if he was
Yeah,
telling
and
it himself,
especially
I'd be
when
like, whoa, we got a badass over here bigging himself up.
yeah, well, I think it worked so well having Graver explain the backstory after we've already seen what Alejandro is willing to do,
Mm.
and all of a sudden, so now we're at basically the climax of the film. It's 'cause it's right after the tunnels, and now you get that context, and all of a sudden you go, I understand why why this is his path, and like you didn't need it to know he was a badass hitman, but now just add it that personal level. And I loved that line. It's like, oh, it wasn't personal level, it was to me.
You know what? That was actually a little bit much for me.
Yeah.
It was a little too catchphrasy,
Mm,
and this movie just didn't have that kind of feeling. I mean, I
mm,
don't mind throwing one in, but I wouldn't say it pulled me out, but it just seemed misplaced.
mm. I don't think I found it quite as misplaced, but that's because I said it in Spanish.
Mm.
I think if I heard it in English, I probably would have got pulled out of it.
Was it me or did oh, what was his name? Silvio.
Mm.
Did you find it weird that Alejandro shot Silvio?
Mm.
I guess from Alejandro's point of view, Silvio was just part of this cartel that he was actively assaulting at that time. So,
So Silvio's a kind of just an interesting aspect of the story altogether. It's one of those things where I do think his inclusion was completely needed in the film,
mm, definitely.
but at the same time, it feels so out of place in the film. So
Well, I mean, it has a humanizing effect on this, like these drug smugglers.
yeah, and so it almost leaves me going like they were trying to do like a no. I take it back. I think in another film it would have felt cheap. Like it was definitely something to play on your emotions. That's why you have that because he's really not connected to the film until he is. So this is it. I watched this like when it first came out and hadn't really seen it since. So bits of it slipped my mind. So when I saw him there, I was like, oh, yeah, was he? I knew he was tied to the cartel. I couldn't remember if like maybe he was higher up in the cartel or like being a brother or something like that.
No, just
Um,
crooked Mexican cop.
yeah. Uh, so that's why it's. I mean, I'm not surprised that he shot him. I mean, he doesn't show. He doesn't care for. He shows he's fine with collateral damage if it's needed.
Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a weird choice. There was definitely a subverted expectation there
Mm.
because I really felt that he was going to be let free because especially because he was being so compliant. But then from that same aspect, Alejandro again, as you expressed it quite well, not concerned about collateral damage.
I like to think there's actually literally only one person that you actually, well, two people, I guess you see let him that he quote unquote lets free.
Mm.
One was Kate, and the other was the servant who clearly had nothing to do with the cartel other than happening to be the person who's, making the meal and cleaning.
There was something in that dinner scene I really like. The whole like constant like finish your meal, keep eating, repeat it,
Yeah.
repeat it, and then he shoots the wife and two kids and goes finish your meal.
Yeah.
And I was just like, ooh.
I like that. I also like how it's something I saw is like people thought it was weird that he just walked up to the dinner table so nonchalantly. Like, because, there's guards and stuff. He literally knew there was no one else there except for the four of them.
Yeah, he was given the count from like a
Yeah.
sky-based heat scan.
Yeah. It was just something that I read is like, oh, so you guys weren't paying attention to him counting.
Well, I didn't even like it. I thought it had been expressed well enough. I didn't even have to consciously
Yeah.
notice it.
No, and the only reason I pointed out, because again, I was that same way until I like specifically saw someone going, but why did this happen? I'm like, oh, there are people out there that dumb. This is why we now have movies that explain everything.
I was actually worried on that same aspect. I was worried that they were going to use Kate as like a cabbage head trope, just someone that they had to like constantly explain things to, so the audience could experience through her.
Yeah.
Whereas there's probably a trope for this, but it was in that same vein, keeping Kate in the dark so that you can keep the audience in the dark.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big reason why they focused on her. Why, again, she was our protagonist and not Alejandro or Graver, which honestly, like, I haven't seen the sequel.
I
It
think
does
there's
make me
two
a little
sequels.
concerned. Is there two? I know there's at least one. It makes me a little concerned when I see like the sequel, one of the posters for the sequel being Matt and Alejandro with like assault rifles. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, that's not the
My mind immediately just goes to it's like, ooh, do I want to see the sequel? And I don't think it needs a sequel in any way, shape, or form. So
I mean, it if I'm gonna check this right now. So the director of the sequel, Stefano Salima, written by Taylor Sheridan. The original directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by Taylor Sheridan. So at least the writer's the same.
okay.
This is probably something where I'd want to see the same director,
Mm,
just from how well expressed this film was.
yeah.
I mean, oh, okay. Same director as Blade Runner 2049, 2021's Dune. Okay, a lot of Dune.
There's mm, there's definitely a lot there. I mean, you need to look at some of the other projects. Again, yours said he expressed it so well. He did Arrival as well. Can't remember if I've seen Arrival. I feel like I have.
I have not, and I keep meaning to.
Yeah, I feel like I have, but I might be getting it confused with another one. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Taking a look at the director of the second one, it looks like he may be much more action oriented.
Yeah.
Which, mind you, if they so much of this film is the transitions between like a world made of grays and a saturated or like an overly saturated world,
Mhm.
and how it kind of moves between these and goes back and forth across the line. Um, well, almost even feeling almost like if there was tinges of thriller to it. So if they kind of push this into like an action adventure, it's gonna have a
Mm.
completely different feel.
Yeah, this this movie feels very psychological.
Yes.
And I guess my worries for any type of sequels that come from this would be like Mission Impossible. The first Mission Impossible, or heck, Fast and the Furious would be another good example. Like the first of those films, like the first ones, they were very much like
Fast and the Furious
um,
9 is the greatest movie of all time. They shot a car
I haven't
into
seen it yet.
space, goddammit.
I haven't seen it yet, and Elon Musk beat them to it. um, oh, it's like it started off with again like it was a generally actually it was a crime movie, right?
Hmm.
It was literally a cop movie, and then it turns into just these. They just go off on the action. Not a bad thing. I enjoy I enjoy those films for what they are. Mission Impossible, that same thing. It was very much a spy thriller. Like there was like no body count in the first Mission Impossible, right? To these big action set pieces like Fallout was, and
It almost feels like a downfall of the Mission Impossibles as soon as there was the Limp Bizkit soundtracked motorbike fight scene.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so that's what I am worried about for any sequels that come from this, especially again when I see that poster of them back to back with with assault rifles. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want this to go action heavy. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, with the same writer, there is hope.
yes, yes, that's true.
That being said,
So,
there is a lot of action creep in media. Like
yes,
things do have to, like even in things that are that are well paced and long
mhm,
format, such as like your mangas, they do it.
yeah,
You even see it in shows like DS9
yeah,
action creep. Like it starts out as your slice of life on a space station. All of a sudden, there's like this galactic war going on.
yeah,
So things need to do step up. I mean, all we can hope is they don't turn it up to 11 for Sicario 2.
yeah. That's true. Speaking of the thriller aspect of that, that was actually one thing that I noticed. So I've already kind of mentioned like this film has very little music. It
Mm.
uses silence a lot, and every time there's music, you feel that tension coming through it. And I actually wrote down, I'm like, this is almost like a horror soundtrack when I'm listening to this music. To go and do my research today to find out that the composer very specifically based the music off of Jaws.
That makes sense.
So it actually was a horror soundtrack, and it worked so well at just building with that psychological aspect of and tension. And again, even though the things are brief, kind of horrific.
Yeah,
um,
I definitely that psychological aspect of it really gave me thriller vibes. Even though definitely know this was more of like a crime drama
yeah,
situation, the little tinges here and there, and how it was expressed through the sound design, shots, film, the acting.
mm,
There's a lot of like I wouldn't give it A pluses across the board, but I would definitely give each one high marks.
yeah,
I didn't think any. The only time I noticed the music was when I went, "Oh, that's the right choice."
yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the only time there you heard the music.
It was.
There was again there was more music in Harajuku as me is missing, and we specifically talked about how little music there was in that film.
Mm, I could see that.
But it didn't need it. All of the shots and the acting and it was plenty to drive it. And it's kind of refreshing to have the soundtrack back off.
That being said, I mean, one of these days I would love for us to come across a late 90s, early 2000s film where we specifically get to talk about how it's a film designed to sell a soundtrack because
This sounds
we're
like something that might have gotten mentioned in the Discord.
Queen of the Damn soundtrack is so good. Uh, Overall, though, yeah, I really enjoyed almost every aspect of the movie, except for the fact that I feel like there was a bunch of unfinished concepts, and I'm wondering if those were just loose threads for that psychological aspect. But I noticed it enough that it bothered me.
Alright.
So I'm,
Yeah, I can't like I don't feel anything myself that like I mean I can see what you mean by loose threads, but I didn't feel like anything was
well,
it was finished exactly how they wanted it to be finished. It didn't
everything
feel
that was needed to
unfinished.
be finished was finished.
Yeah, yeah. It didn't yeah, I think you're right about that. That leaving it feeling a little bit like a thriller because it's yeah, I didn't feel like, oh God, why didn't this question or get answered? I didn't feel like it was plot threads that were there. It's just kind of like, huh, wonder where that stuff goes. And yeah, that plays to the thriller aspect more.
Mm.
Mm.
I mean, it does kind of like it's a bit of a minus for me because there was a lot of threads that I wish that they had continued with, but in that same aspect, I do kind of have to weigh that with the fact that if they had gone with some of those other threads, I would have felt the movie would have been
Yeah,
cheapened by it.
yeah.
And I guess that is why I would give this film, I would traffic 29 individually wrapped kilos out of 33 in my trunk.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely give this, yeah, right up there with you. 8 out of 9 millimeters.
That's a good one.
Thanks. Absolutely, this is a must-watch film. It is. There's just so much right in how they did this film.
I think it's sad that I have to say this, but nowadays, like more mainstream filmmaking, it's sad that I have to say this, but in today's day and age, with like the way that mainstream films are, I also have to consider the fact that there wasn't any major failings of the film.
Mm.
Like the fact that it didn't let me down is a positive thing, and it's so weird. Like we don't come out and we don't have like the actors, you know, hating on the fans of the series on social media. We don't have weird drama around it. There wasn't weird like directing mix ups, and there wasn't anything that clashed in the film itself. Each
Yeah,
piece felt like it was the right piece for the film, even down to
yeah,
the casting choices.
yeah. I can't picture it any other way.
Exactly.
Like, and
But
there are plenty of films that I can picture other ways.
well, that's the thing. Like, if it was 20 years ago, I wouldn't even consider it that way. That it being a positive thing, that there isn't anything majorly negative about it, where that should just be a given.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. Uh,
well, I guess with that, I'll wrap it up. With that, this has been Beardy and the Beast Media Club. Join us next time where we discuss the Studio Chizu animated film Ryo to Sobakasu no Hime, or Belle. As always, if you like what we do, give us a like and a share. Otherwise, join the conversation in the comments below or at our Discord. We'll see you next time.